In a word from the former Foreign Secretary of India, Mr. Vardhan Shringla. He is joining us live on Times Now. Sir, good morning, and thank you very much for taking out your time. Sir, looking at the current situation, India, which has now formally withdrawn its High Commissioner in Canada and also expelled 6 top Canadian diplomats, would you say India-Canada ties have now effectively collapsed?
Well, it is certainly in a very, very difficult position now. There have been a series of incidents almost from the time that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took over as Prime Minister of Canada. I would even call them provocations. His visit to India was designed to pander to a certain vote bank back in Canada that backfired. In 2020, he made some blatant remarks that constituted interference in our internal affairs when the farmers' protests were going on. He has addressed Parliament talking about a potential involvement of Indian officials in an investigation in Canada before he consulted us. He has, I think, always shot the gun before taking any public position on this issue. India has constantly maintained that we want, evidence to be provided. And as per the Ministry of External Affairs' statement, there is not a shred of evidence that has been forthcoming on this issue. So from every point of view, I think Prime Minister Trudeau has compromised and sacrificed the larger India-Canada relationship at the altar of narrow domestic political ends. And I think this is where, therein lies the nub. And that is where I think we really need to clearly ask him where he wants to take this relationship. I mean, clearly this is at a low point, at a very low point today.
But Mr. Shringla, one of the main allegations by India is that Canada has been supporting extremism, violence and separatism against India. It's a direct accusation. But when it comes to the Canadians that have been accusing the Indian government of using its agents to collaborate with gangsters to eliminate Khalistanis on Canadian soil, this has been a new allegation that has now been leveled.
So I think let's start with the charges of extremism, separatism, terrorism. We have been constantly providing Canada with information on the actions of certain, let's say, anti-nationals, anti-Indian nationals in Canada that have been advocating separatism, and their links to organized crime, their links to acts of terrorism, their links to drug trafficking, arms smuggling, human trafficking. We have told Canada that it's in their interest to act against these people for their own safety and security of their citizens. But the Canadians have not acted. So that is one part of it. And of course, on the other side, they're accusing us and our officials of conniving with certain under people to achieve our. Looking at all the articles, everything on the public domain very carefully. And I didn't find any evidence, including the Royal Canadian Mounted Police press conference that was held. Didn't find any evidence to indicate the link between Indian officials and this Bishnoi gang. I mean, after all, this gang is wanted for crimes within India itself. So why should we be using these elements in Canada? So I don't know, where all this is coming from, and unfortunately, none of this is doing very much, for the relationship. None of this is backed up with evidence. And as far as we are concerned, I think there is one provocation too many from the Canadian side, and we need to call them out on this issue.
I believe that India has already been doing that, but do you think that domestic politics, if we have to put it bluntly, when it comes to Prime Minister Trudeau's apparent reliance on pro-Khalistani elements like Jagmeet Singh, which has played a role in Canada's actions, perhaps to woo him back into the alliance as far as vote bank politics in Canada is concerned?
No, absolutely, absolutely. The fact that he's reliant on a political party whose leader espouses separatism from India itself is an indication that he wants to pander to this interest for his own, as I said, political ends, and he has sacrificed the larger India-Canada relationship at the altar of narrow political ends. So we have to, I think, be able to call this out. We cannot go along with the charade of being accused in the international and public domain without having proper evidence to back it up, without any level of cooperation. And my own sense is that this whole thing, this entire, whatever we're talking about today, comes from Canada's pandering to these interests. You pander to a narrow, very small political base of people who are clearly involved in organized crime and activities detrimental to your own security in Canada. We have been saying for a long time that we need to work against these interests as two democracies, two friendly countries. But under Trudeau, Canada, unfortunately, has done the opposite. And it's always been a charade, political charade. I think the time has come for us to take some fairly firm steps, which we are doing. And I think it's time to tell the Canadian public that, look, I mean, you have to either rein in your prime minister who is clearly on a very, very off track as far as his policies are concerned, or face the consequences. The consequences could be in many forms, but there could be further consequences of these actions.
But Mr. Shringla, as far as the Canadian Prime Minister is concerned, he appears to be claiming the moral high ground here. He's leveling direct allegations against India, and yet at the same time saying that Canada respects India's sovereignty and territorial integrity. So is he saying that despite his government support of a united India and thereby rejecting Khalistani movement, the Indian government meanwhile is using agents to assassinate Canadian citizens on its soil? How do you see this stand, the differing stand?
So there's an anachronism here. You respect India's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and yet you don't take any action against those elements that support separatism from India and who are indulging openly in anti-India activities, who have links to terrorism and organized crime. And I think from that perspective, there is a clear contradiction. For him to say anything beyond that, I think there is no consistency or justification for him to level any accusations as far as we are concerned. And I think, we have today taken a firm stand. We have not only expelled their Shahzada affair and 6 of their diplomats, but clearly we have also, told the Canadians in very forthright terms that this is where this whole thing stops, or there will be more consequences as far as we are concerned.
There's also been a press briefing, Mr. Shringla, as far as the Canadian leadership is concerned, indicating that it has continuously been working with its Five Eyes partners in regard over the past year. Will India address this issue?
No, well, there is a level of intelligence and security cooperation between some of these countries, but how that impinges on what we're talking about is not very clear. We deal with each of these countries separately. We have separate diplomatic relations. We have good relations with all these countries. And none of these countries have told us anything that it appears, I'm talking about the public domain, anything that is, seems to sort of substantiate what Prime Minister Trudeau or the Canadians are saying. So we will have to take the Canadians and the Canadian sentiments, as a separate sort of, let's say, initiative of their own, and not linked it to anything that our other partners, are dealing with us on their own issues.
So, Mr. Shringla, talking about diplomatic relations, do you believe that why has India's approach been different when it comes to the US and also accusing Indian agents of trying to assassinate Panun? In that case, we appear to have adopted a tone of cooperation. I mean, US has also issued a statement urging both India and Canada to solve the issues.
No, the US has not accused us. They're saying there's an investigation, and that is now with the federal judge or a judge in the New York court. So that is a different issue. There is a difference between the Canadian side, where the Prime Minister himself has been, postulating on this issue at public forum without any evidence, and the US approach, which has been working with us on trying to see whether there is anything that links, anyone to some of the alleged attempts at assassination of Gurpatwant Singh Panun, who himself is, has strong links to terrorism and separatism, and is in my view, is the one who should be the person of interest. But yes, I mean, their approach has been different. They've handled it through diplomatic channels. We're working quietly in addressing this issue. And this is what the Canadians should have done. They should have worked with us, through the channels that we have, the mechanisms that we had, and work to see, where we can help them and where we can. We've been telling the Canadians right from the beginning, work with us to address these issues of people who are involved in organized crime between both our countries, people who are involved in acts of terrorism, and let's collectively deal with them. I mean, whether they're Indian nationals or Canadian nationals, let's deal with them. But the Canadians haven't done that. They've taken the high moral ground. They're preaching from the pulpit. Prime Minister Trudeau himself has constantly been talking about this. It's his own crusade that he has to, bring India to book, and that, this is something that is in his country's interest. But actually, he's working against his country's interest because he's sheltering criminals, he's sheltering extremists, and that will impact on them over the medium to long term. You'll find that will definitely impact on Canada's security and well-being. And of course, at the same time, I think, the relationship is clearly compromised in this regard.
Absolutely. Very unfortunate over those wild allegations that have been leveled on part of the Canadian authorities as far as their Prime Minister also is concerned. However, this bitter diplomatic standoff between India and Canada continues. Mr. Shringla, thank you very much for taking out your time and speaking to us here on Times. Now, with that, we head into a short break.